Forget the final battle in Jurassic World. The truth about Giganotosaurus is far more terrifying than any movie script. For nearly a century, we believed that Tyrannosaurus Rex was the undisputed heavyweight champion of the predatory world. We were wrong. In the desolate badlands of Argentina, a true monster was waiting to be found. It was longer than a T-Rex. It was taller than a T-Rex. But it didn't kill with brute force. It didn't crush bones. It possessed a mouth full of serrated blades that looked like they belonged to a great white shark, designed to slice through flesh like a hot knife through butter. And the craziest part? It hunted prey the size of a Boeing 737. This was not a budget version of the T-Rex. This was Giganotosaurus, the giant southern lizard, and it represented a completely different philosophy of killing. Brutal, surgical, and drenched in blood. The story of the Giganotosaurus discovery is a testament to the fact that the greatest scientific finds often happen not by design, but by sheer serendipity. It did not begin in a university lecture hall or a well-funded international expedition. It began in 1993 with a car mechanic named Reuben Carolini. Carolini was an amateur fossil hunter who spent his free time exploring the vast, wind-swept deserts of the Neuquén province in Patagonia, Argentina. He was driving a dune buggy across the Candeleros Formation, a geological layer dating back to the Cenomanian stage of the late Cretaceous, roughly 97 million years ago. This region is a badlands in every sense of the word. It is dry, dusty, and visually spectacular, a red rock wilderness where the ancient earth lies exposed to the elements. While traversing this rugged terrain, Carolini spotted something that looked out of place. It was a tibia, or shin bone, eroding out of the reddish rock. But this was not just any bone. It was colossal. When professional paleontologists Rodolfo Coria and Leonardo Salgado arrived to excavate the site, the scale of the find began to dawn on them. They were not just digging up another dinosaur, they were digging up a record breaker. The skeleton was roughly 70% complete, a rarity for such a massive predator. It included the skull, pelvis, leg bones, and most of the spine. When the measurements were finalized and the paper was published in 1995, it sent shockwaves through the scientific community, particularly in North America. For nearly a century, Tyrannosaurus Rex had been the undisputed king, the gold standard for large theropods. But the specimen found by Carolini, which was named Giganotosaurus carolinii in his honor, challenged that reign. The holotype specimen was estimated to be between 12.5 and 13 meters long. A second, fragmentary jawbone, suggested an even larger individual, potentially reaching 14 meters or 46 feet. In contrast, Sue, the largest and most complete T-Rex, measures about 12.3 meters. In terms of linear dimension, the southern giant was simply bigger. It was longer, taller at the hips, and possessed a skull that was nearly 2 meters long, which is bigger than a human being. However, size is complex. While Giganotosaurus was longer, it was built differently. It was the slender giant. T-Rex was a barrel-chested, thick-boned brawler. Giganotosaurus was laterally compressed, meaning it was thinner and more athletic. This structural difference was not just aesthetic. It was the blueprint for a completely different style of predation that evolved in isolation on the southern supercontinent of Gondwana. To understand the terror of Giganotosaurus, one must look past its size and focus on its weaponry. Evolution equips predators with the tools they need for their specific prey, and the tool set of Giganotosaurus was designed for soft tissue destruction. The most striking feature is the teeth. A Tyrannosaurus tooth is a spike. It is thick, round in cross-section and deeply rooted. It is designed to withstand the immense shock of biting into solid bone. A Giganotosaurus tooth, however, is a blade. It is flattened from side to side, curved backward, and lined with fine, sharp serrations on both the front and back edges. If you run your finger along a T-Rex tooth, it feels like a banana. If you run your finger along a Giganotosaurus tooth, it feels like a steak knife. These teeth were not made for crushing. They were made for slicing. This design is supported by the architecture of the skull. The skull of Giganotosaurus was huge, but surprisingly lightweight for its size, filled with large openings called fenestrae to reduce weight. More importantly, it possessed a capability known as cranial kinesis. Cranial kinesis is the ability of the bones in the skull to move relative to one another. The lower jaw of Giganotosaurus was not a rigid block. It had joints that allowed the jaw to widen slightly when the mouth was opened. This allowed the predator to swallow larger chunks of meat, but more importantly, it facilitated a specific biting style known as slash and pull. When Giganotosaurus attacked, it would slam its open upper jaw onto the prey like a hatchet. The teeth would sink in. Then, using its powerful neck muscles, it would pull its head backward. The serrated teeth would act like a saw, shearing through skin, muscle, and fascia with terrifying ease. Because the teeth were flat, they encountered less resistance than the thick spikes of a T-Rex. They would not get stuck. This made Giganotosaurus a bleeder. It did not rely on the brute force of a bone-crushing bite, which is estimated at only a third of the bite force of a T-Rex. Instead, it relied on causing catastrophic blood loss. A single bite could sever major arteries, leaving a wound that would never close. It was a strategy of surgical brutality. Why did Giganotosaurus evolve such a gruesome method of killing? The answer lies in the ecosystem it inhabited. The Candeleros Formation was not a place for the weak. It was the land of giants. In North America, the largest herbivores were Triceratops and Edmontosaurus, animals weighing between 6 to 10 tons. A T-Rex could conceivably wrestle these animals to the ground. But in Patagonia, 97 million years ago, Giganotosaurus lived in the shadow of the titanosaurs. Its primary neighbors were animals like Ankylosaurus and the colossal Argentinosaurus. Argentinosaurus pushes the limits of biology. Estimates place it at 30 to 35 meters long and weighing between 70 and 90 tons. A single Giganotosaurus weighed perhaps 8 tons. The weight ratio was 1 to 10. For a human, this is the equivalent of trying to fight a school bus with your bare hands. If a Giganotosaurus tried to grapple with an Argentinosaurus or bite onto its leg and hold on, it would be killed instantly. The kinetic energy of a sauropod tail whip or a stomp would turn the predator into paste. The crush and hold strategy of the tyrannosaurs would be a suicide mission here. So, Giganotosaurus adapted. It became a specialized giant slayer using a tactic known as mobbing or flesh grazing. Paleontologists believe that Giganotosaurus did not hunt alone. Evidence from a related species known as Mapusaurus, which was found in a mass grave with multiple individuals of different ages, suggests that these Carcharodontosaurids formed loose gangs or family groups. Imagine the hunt. A group of 4 or 5 Giganotosaurus isolates a massive Argentinosaurus. They do not try to tackle it. Instead, they coordinate a dance of death. One predator rushes in, delivers a slicing bite to the leg, and retreats before the tail can swing. Another attacks the flank. A third targets the base of the tail. They are essentially grazing on the live animal. They are taking bites of flesh, weakening the titan through blood loss and infection. They do not need to kill it quickly. They just need to wait. The hunt becomes a war of attrition. The giant sauropod, bleeding from dozens of slash wounds, eventually succumbs to exhaustion and shock. It crashes to the ground, providing a feast that could sustain the pack for weeks. This ecosystem dynamic, where predators hunted prey 10 times their size, is unique in Earth's history and explains why Giganotosaurus had to be the scalpel rather than the hammer. An animal of this size generates immense heat. This brings us to the fascinating concept of gigantothermy. For a long time, scientists debated whether dinosaurs were cold-blooded ectotherms or warm-blooded endotherms. Giganotosaurus sits in a unique middle ground. An animal of that mass has a low surface area-to-volume ratio. Once it gets hot, it stays hot. It essentially becomes a biological furnace. Recent isotopic studies of oxygen in the bones of Giganotosaurus suggest it had a metabolic rate higher than a reptile, but lower than a modern mammal. It maintained a constant high body temperature simply by being huge. This allowed it to be active, agile, and capable of bursts of speed that a cold-blooded crocodile could never dream of. Estimates of its speed are terrifying. Biomechanical models suggest Giganotosaurus could reach speeds of up to 14 meters per second, which translates to 31 miles per hour. This is significantly faster than the estimated top speed of a T-Rex. The slender build, the long legs, and the powerful tail acting as a counterbalance made it a high-speed pursuit predator for its size class. It was a freight train that could outrun a racehorse. If you look at the endocast, the mold of the brain cavity, of Giganotosaurus, it looks somewhat primitive compared to the T-Rex. It is smaller, more elongated, and lacks the expanded cerebral hemispheres seen in the genus Tyrannosaurs. This has led to the unfair reputation of Giganotosaurus being a giant idiot. But intelligence is not a single linear scale. Evolution does not waste energy building a supercomputer if a calculator will do the job. The prey of Giganotosaurus, the sauropods, were not intellectually complex targets. They did not use strategy. They used size. Therefore, Giganotosaurus did not need to solve complex puzzles to catch them. It needed sensory acuity. The olfactory lobes of Giganotosaurus were well developed. It had an exceptional sense of smell. In the vast open plains of Cretaceous Patagonia, the ability to detect a carcass or a herd from miles away was the most critical survival skill. Its vision, while not having the overlapping binocular precision of T-Rex, was oriented sideways, giving it a wide field of view to scan the horizon. It was not stupid. It was optimized. It was the perfect machine for its specific job. It possessed the instinctual, coordinated intelligence seen in modern Komodo dragons or sharks, animals that are not doing calculus, but are terrifyingly effective at finding and killing food. Giganotosaurus was the crown jewel of the family Carcharodontosauridae, the shark-toothed lizards. This group was the dominant predatory force on the southern continents of Gondwana for tens of millions of years. While tyrannosaurs were still small, coyote-sized annoyances in the north, the Carcharodontosaurids were apex predators globally. They include the high-spined Acrocanthosaurus of North America, the African Carcharodontosaurus, and the Argentine Mapusaurus. A recent discovery in 2022, named Meraxes gigas, has shed even more light on Giganotosaurus. Meraxes is a close relative that preserved a complete arm. It confirmed that these giants, like the T-Rex, had reduced forelimbs. However, unlike the two-fingered T-Rex, they retained 3 fingers armed with massive, hooked claws. While small relative to the body, these arms were incredibly muscular. They were not useless vestigial organs. They were grappling hooks, perhaps used to latch onto a mate or helped the animal rise from a resting position. This dynasty represents one of the most successful evolutionary experiments in history. For over 40 million years, the giant scalpel design was the undisputed ruler of the southern hemisphere. So, what happened? Why do we not see Giganotosaurus fighting T-Rex in the fossil record outside of movies? They were separated by time and geography. Giganotosaurus lived about 30 million years before T-Rex. It went extinct around 90 million years ago, long before the asteroid hit. Its extinction was not caused by a cataclysm from space, but by a shift in the Earth beneath its feet. The boundary between the Cenomanian and Turonian ages was a time of extreme global warming and sea level rise. The environment of South America changed. The vast, dry plains that supported the megasauropods began to shift. As the specific species of giant titanosaurs began to decline or change, the specialist predator that relied on them found itself starving. Giganotosaurus was too big, too specialized, and required too much food to survive a changing world. It fell into the specialization trap. When the Carcharodontosaurids vanished, they left a vacuum in the ecosystem. This vacuum in the southern continents was eventually filled by the Abelisaurids, strange, short-faced, stubby-armed predators like Carnotaurus. In the north, the vacuum allowed the tyrannosaurs to grow from small hunters into the giants we know. Giganotosaurus did not fail. It reigned supreme for millions of years. It simply exited the stage when its role in the play was over. Giganotosaurus deserves respect, not just because it was bigger than T-Rex, but because it represented a completely different way of being a monster. It is proof that nature has more than one way to build a king. If T-Rex was absolute power, Giganotosaurus was absolute technique. It was a living, breathing greatsword, a dragon slayer that dared to challenge the largest animals to ever walk the earth. Today, when we look at its skeleton, we don't see a failure. We see the monarch of a lost age, a reminder that even the greatest giants can fall when the world changes beneath their feet. If you enjoyed this journey into the world of the southern giant, make sure to subscribe to Extinct Echoes to uncover more forgotten legends. And let us know in the comments, which team are you on? Team Power or Team Technique?